Yes, it's me, Mike Stone, and this is the Backseat Driver Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Gas Shocks, home of the 116 Trophy and 120 Coupe Cup. Hoddy Tyres, find the best tyres for your vehicle, supplying all the top brands to keep you covered in every season and every condition. Tarox Brakes, the art of slowing down, precision engineered in Italy for ultimate performance, and Specialised Automotive Services, specialists in high-quality automotive maintenance and classic car restoration. You can find the details of all our proud sponsors for this episode in the show notes. I'd like to welcome to the Backseat Driver Alan Stacey, or, just to make sure we know who we're talking about or talking to, Alan McGregor Stacey, because we're going to chat about his uncle, his racing driver uncle, Alan Stacey. Just to add to the confusion a little bit, Alan Stacey was probably the most unlikely racing driver. He grew up on a farm, he had no money, and we all still know the feeling, and he lost his right leg in an accident that wasn't his fault whilst riding a motorbike, and went on to become a very, very successful racing driver, mainly for Lotus. He had a passion for Lotus, did Alan Stacey, and he lost his life in the 1960 Belgian Grand Prix, and nobody to this day really knows how the accident happened. But we may find out a little bit more, because I'd like to now once again welcome Alan McGregor Stacey to the Backseat Driver. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right, I mean, it's like we were saying, a lot of racing drivers, once something happens, once you stop or once something happens, the memory of them fades very quickly, which at times is a shame, but it is the nature of motor racing. But I mean, what sort of influence did Alan Stacey, the racing driver, have on you and the rest of the family? And when was it you realised who your uncle was?
Oh, that's a good question. It was just ubiquitous that there was always a picture or a car or someone to talk to, people asking questions. So I never really knew a time when he wasn't part of my life, whether it's a portrait hanging on a wall or someone asking questions or talking about him. But I don't think, when you're a child, you only have one reality. So
Yeah.
I don't think it really kind of dawned on me until probably I was an adult, and it started becoming a question that was asked more and more as I played around in motor racing and other things. But my father was a successful powerboat racing driver, so a lot of the conversations tended to divert onto him when we were at race meetings.
Yeah.
But this, as we were saying, this is one of the huge advantages of having a professional publishing house do the book. I was probably just far too close to the subject to have an objective, independent view of the story.
Yeah. I mean, how's Alan Stacey, has the racing driver, Alan, had a continuing influence on the Stacey family?
Yes, I think so. Yes, probably subliminal, sort of in the background. Subjects that didn't want to get raised, because obviously a tragic death at a young age, it's something you want to probably bury a little bit. But yeah, I think there was a background, but it was never vocalised. There was never... And he drove a car, so you ought to, or anything like that.
Yeah.
But his memory was kept alive, but it wasn't like a worshipping an idol or anything. It was a bit more low key than that.
Now the irony was, Alan grew up in a age that was far more innocent in many ways. I mean, he came from a farming background, and it's like we said before we went on air, it was the accident that gave him the money to go and do it. But he'd had a passion to want to race before that, hasn't he?
Yes, building up the Speedwagon, as it's shown in the book, at such a young age, taking relatives and family round a race course on a farm with a bodged up part, a bit special, made from the scrapyard on the farm. I mean, he was well. They're all speed mad, the whole lot of them. But he was especially keen. And some of the pictures in the book, show how young they were, barely able to reach the steering wheel.
And the one thing that would have taught him, of course, subliminally, would be handling, wouldn't it? I mean, if you start driving I did it when I was a kid. I used to get the keys to my grandfather's Land Rover and Range Rover given to me. He owned a lot of land, and off you go and play about. And all of a sudden you realise years later that it taught you the basics of handling a car.
Absolutely. I was lucky enough to have a similar experience in an old Land Rover as a youngster. And I think, a muddy farm track with a bits of special. And the first version of the Speedwagon didn't even have tyres on the wheels. So car control just probably got absorbed naturally, as you say. And then as they progressed the wagon, I guess engineering came in as well.
Yeah.
Self-taught engineering before he went to de Havilland's on the apprenticeship.
I mean, that would have helped a lot because, how did he develop his passion for Lotus? Because, Lotus at that time was a fledgling company.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a very good question, and we're not sure we've got an exact answer to that. I don't think there was an epiphany, but if you look back at the magazines of the time, Colin was starting to make a name for himself. They were having some success with the Lotus 6. Obviously, the Lotus 11 became very successful, so that was a no-brainer. But I suspect the first car, the kit car, the Lotus 6, was a cheap way of getting into club sport and see how it went. The Lotus 11 decision was probably, Chapman's being quite successful now. This looks quite radical. Let's go for a much more competitive car. Because the Lotus 6 only raced for one season.
Right. Because, the beauty of the Lotus 6 was, and I've known one or two other people who started out with very similar Lotus, if you bought it as a kit, you avoided paying certain taxes on it. So it was actually a cheap way of getting a sports car.
Absolutely. And then you've got the flexibility of which gearbox and engine, etc., that you wanted to fit to your chassis.
And, did he build it on the farm?
He did. There was another farm that my grandfather purchased for various reasons to expand the farm. He actually built it in the workshop of that new acquisition. There's some pictures in the book of Pete Ashdown using it to rebuild his car later on after an accident. But yeah, it was built over the winter there with Michael, my uncle, his brother, helped him build the kit car, and I think that's where they were both practical farming and engineering skills came to the fore, and they put the Climax engine in and built a very competitive car.
Yeah,
great way to go racing. And borrowed a trailer. I had a trailer from the farm, and then borrowed their father's car to get to the circuit. And so even though he'd come into a bit of money, I don't think he was looking to spend it straight away. If you see what I mean.
But I conclude both Alan and the rest of the family realised that there was a talent there.
Yeah, I think that was probably coming from some results, and then as soon as he got into the Lotus 11, that's when the consistency and the better results came along. So I guess the 6 sowed the seed, and the compensation check from the motorcycle accident allowed the funds. And then Colin's success and support, and then obviously later on becoming a Team B Lotus driver, where he had access to parts and etc. So I guess it's stages, isn't it? Any motor racing story starts with an opportunity, see how it goes, success breeds success.
Now, the one thing he became renowned for was, and it's something I've always admired, is this, because though in my career I drove very big, quite large engined cars, Alan achieved phenomenal success and a reputation racing and winning in small engined cars. And I've always said, if you can get a small engined car and you drive it right, you will equal the performance and at times outperform far more powerful machinery. There is something very satisfying about racing small engined cars. And I conclude for Alan, it was a necessity that he drove small engined cars.
Yeah, I guess that's where the opportunity came. But yeah, you're absolutely right. How he had the the sort of the delicacy that you need to operate a low capacity car with a false leg. I don't know. I've interviewed a couple of people who've had injuries or had artificial limbs and raced, and they just don't no idea how Alan achieved it. But I don't know. Bill Basson was there with a false arm, Aaron there with a false leg. He drove a car for, you'll see in the book, a car for a gentleman who had a false leg from the war. I guess they were surrounded by people with handicaps and this, that, and the other. But tremendous delicacy with a leg that didn't really work properly.
The other fascinating thing is, as well, he controlled the throttle on with a motorbike's twist grip attached to the gear lever. And every time when I was reading the book, I thought, how the hell did he manage to achieve this? Because ultimately he would have been driving one-handed all the time.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to know. I wish you still allowed to ask him, but we're mystified. I think the Lotus 6 didn't even have that adaptation, so his first racing. It's impossible to work out how on earth he controlled the throttle with a tin foot. It's hard enough driving. I drive my pickup with walking boots on, and it just feels very strange.
Yeah.
To have no sensation coming through the foot must be hard to explain, hard to understand. But somehow he adapted, and something I hope.
So, and I mean, you often ponder as to what Chapman's reaction to this was, or as I said, Alan didn't regard his handicap as a handicap. Now, I can only surmise that Chapman was of a similar mindset, that he can drive, we just have to put the throttle somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess also there was some element of scrutineering and medical checks at certain events. So we do suspect that the handicap was probably played down as much as possible, simply because it would have been a problem.
Yeah.
At some of the international events, and there are stories about how they tried to wangle that in the French events. But I guess so. But I think the afterward that's written by Clive Chapman is just a perfect insight. I think is a section where he says, my father was never one known for his charitable gestures when it came to motor racing. And I think that's right. He must have looked on Alan's results, and that's all he really cared about.
Yeah. Because it's like you said, Chapman was in many respects ruthless, in a little bit like Enzo Ferrari. It was the car that was the thing and not the person driving it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I should, I was obviously going back a little bit. We should recognise the talents of Bill Basson, his mechanic, that really, prepared the car with Alan and probably kept him alive, because these were fragile vehicles, and Alan didn't have many accidents from component failure during his earlier career. The extraordinary talent and great commitment.
And as I said, driving these small engine cars, I mean, the one thing you realise when he drove for Chapman, that he said, like B team, he'd go to a circuit, go to an event, and all of a sudden his car would be taken off him and given to somebody else. So I conclude that the hand throttle was detachable, or the hand throttle was there, as was the standard throttle.
Well, absolutely. And there's a great picture in the book of that someone else has taken, and it shows the cockpit of the Le Mans car without the bodywork on it. And that's obviously a shared vehicle. They were racing in the same event with people with able-bodied and then handicapped.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't quite got to the detail of how that was disabled, but I guess it wouldn't have been that hard.
Well, I mean, his rise through Lotus and racing was quite impressive, because, I mean, as I said, he became a Formula One driver. He drove Lotus's F1 cars. What was the family's reaction to all this?
It's difficult. I think my uncle, aunt, and father sort of point out that they were all busy with their own lives. They all had their own careers and racing programs and everything. And Alan was sort of rising to the top, but they didn't see him so much. He was just away a lot, racing, qualifying, practicing, traveling in those days. The Argentinian Grand Prix was, I think, 8 different plane journeys. It was, and not like it is today. So I guess, again, it was the reality. They were busy with their own lives, and Alan was becoming a bit of a star.
Yeah.
But that was he was just still the brother. To us, he looks like a star, but if you've been brought up with him, Yeah, it's just, yeah, he's doing all right. Now let's get on with things.
Yeah. I mean, you were never fortunate enough to meet him, were you?
No, he died in 1960. I was born 5 years later. So the reason I got his name is my grandmother wanted the first grandson to take on the name, and I was the first boy that was born after his death. So sadly, no, and I guess I wouldn't have remembered much if I'd only met him in the first few years anyway. But eternally grateful to my mum and dad and some other members of the family who've kept archives, photographic archives and paperwork, even right the way down to the compensation check. So that's the basis of the book.
Yeah.
The decades of material that were kept in boxes that Kevin has so fantastically put into a book.
I mean, that's the one thing. The book it heaves with photographs. Because, I mean, that's a great thing, especially at the back of the book. He travelled all over with a camera, and he's taken photographs of other famous... I mean, the thing is, it's like they always say, if you're taking the photograph, you're never in it. But, I mean, you realise, I mean, a great friend of his was Innes Ireland, and Christiane Ireland, his daughter's a friend of mine. And from the sounds of it, Innes was really deeply shaken when Alan was killed at Spa.
Yeah, that was a huge. Even I think I interviewed someone, and they met Innes in the 80s, the late 80s, and he was in tears recounting the story then. So, yeah, I think there are stories of Innes disappearing because he was due to drive at Le Mans the following weekend, and he just couldn't face it. So, yeah, extraordinary for such a hard man, ex-paratrooper, hard as nails, survived all sorts of accidents. But clearly they'd already created a fantastic bond between them. So, yeah, tragedy, absolute tragedy. And how Innes carried on driving, I don't know. But they were tough people in those days.
Damn sight tougher than the current crop, I must comment. I always have to get the digging about the, shall we say, somewhat namby-pamby nature of the bulk of the modern F1 drivers. Because, I mean, somebody says, oh, he's nudged me off the track a bit. You think, stroll on, pal. In the good old days, you'd have been flying over the barriers.
Yeah, they did have to drive differently because they were such a perilous events. And I should say I've got to just chip in here slightly, but I was fortunate enough to start the research for the book about 15 years ago when Sir John Whitmore and many other people were still alive. So that was a wonderful way to get to know my uncle from people who were his friends, and to record some interviews and pick up some more material that Kevin and BHP have put into the book. So I was lucky. Which I have one regret is wish I didn't done the research 20 years. I mean, even more people are available, but and I'd love to have met Innes and all that stuff, but we can't let regrets for ruin the opportunity. So superbly. My uncle and aunt, our father, mother, was superbly grateful to BHP for putting all this together and for them a chance to read it and contribute to the book as well.
So I get the feeling from that the book was your idea.
Yeah, I guess I was gathering information, and I think I met lots of people, and I was super excited by it. But looking back, I just don't have the talent. I'm not an author.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, I'm just too close to the subject. I think I don't think I could have put this book together in a million years.
Yeah. So how did Kevin Guthrie come on board?
By chance, they've got another book that we've talked about earlier that examining drivers that had lost their lives far too soon.
Forever Young.
Forever Young, yeah, it's fantastic. And my father picked up a comment on Facebook and said, "Oh, could you? Alan's got some material on Alan's career. Could we put it in the book?" And that's what Kevin was contacting. Got in contact with my father and started understanding how much material we had and how much research had been happening and the interviews and the archives and the albums. And he said, "I'll tell you what, could we do a book on Alan on his own?" So we thought, fantastic. Called up with Kevin, came down to stay, and the rest is history. In a very short time, we managed to launch the book.
With Kevin writing it, what was your role in it all?
And the simplest answer is we dumped Kevin a whole load of cardboard boxes with dusty archives and interviews and all that sort of stuff, and he put that into a book. Interviews I'd done with de Havilland ex-colleagues and best men from weddings and all that sort of stuff, and he pieced that all together. So really, credit goes to Kevin for making something out of an absolute mess, really. But also Kevin looked at the photo albums completely differently, and then highlighted, as you said earlier, Alan's ability behind the camera to take pictures. And there's some wonderful pictures of Chris Bristow and Phil Hill and the cars of that era that have never been published before, but it was just a hobby for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say, I conclude a lot of these images have never been seen by the public before.
No, I can't remember. There are 260 images in there. I think there's probably 220 that have never been published.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, yeah, it's a remarkable achievement to get so many pictures. But we did agree with Kevin earlier. Kevin was on board, obviously, but we thought a pictorial book. Once he saw how much information we had, a pictorial book rather than a dry racing history.
Yeah,
was the way forward.
I mean, it's impressive that the Stacey family have retained this incredible archive. Is there one particular person responsible for this? Because I'm not being funny. Lots of things like this would normally have been thrown away.
Yeah, sadly, quite a bit. My grandmother was a bit upset, obviously, and quite a lot of bit of material and other things did get destroyed soon after his death. But my mum's probably the main one. Mum and dad have kept the archive and been meticulous about it.
Yeah.
So but then also my cousin has inherited my uncle's photo album. We've been gifted a photo album by Mick Rowley's widow, and she's got lots of pictures of Alan, because they were great friends. So once the word got out that I was looking into the subject, the material started coming out of all sorts of places, and stuff is still coming out. I mean, I think since we've talked about launching the book, we've been contacted by a guy who shared a desk at school with Alan and was actually at Spa on the day of the tragedy. So
yeah,
incredible. Well, what's still coming out at 92 is just up there with memories and little anecdotes.
I mean, besides the bits and pieces, I mean, what do you still have, like his trophies and things like that?
We have some. His favourite trophies interred with him, but we have some early ones from Brands Hatch and this, that, and the other, and then the one he won at Nürburgring. It was a class victory that he shared the elite with. Again, another car they had to adapt for shared drivers on a strange circuit. But we have some, but not all.
Yeah.
For various reasons. They got split up amongst the family and got lost or destroyed by various things. But yeah, lucky to have an archive and lucky to have something that and also super lucky that my father traced by accident his Lotus 6 many years ago, and it was restored in the early 2000s. So that's now with the family and on the road and taken to events like Goodwood and Silverstone and stuff. So a lovely little bit of history there still within the family and used.
Good. I mean, do you ever get to drive it?
It's here. It's with me. It's in our car storage facility. So I get to see it every day as I go to work. But no, lovely. It's been to Goodwood 20 odd times, and the Silverstone Classic as it was, and driving around the New Forest. It's quite fine. Fly screen, drum brakes, cable operated. That's all you need. About 30 miles an hour, you feel like you're flying.
And I conclude it doesn't have a motorbike throttle anymore. It'll be a conventional pedal car, for want of a better term.
No, and actually the pictures we've got show that he didn't adapt that car for some reason, which is even more of a mystery how he managed to race it. But there are cockpit images that we've managed to track down, and there isn't a twist grip adaptation. So maybe that's something that him and Basson came up with when they got the first Lotus 11.
Yeah. I mean, is the car more or less as Alan built it?
Yeah, Dad put not the original, but he got a Climax engine and cable-operated drum brakes, as I say, and kept all the old, as many old panels that the previous owners had kept. Some things had been modified, but they took it back to as original as possible, and then the only concession was that they put a road cam in the engine rather than a race cam.
Yeah,
because we're never going to race it. So yeah, no seatbelts, no nothing. It's back to its original as far as you can do it.
Have you ever had the urge to race, or has any other member of the Stacey family, apart from your father, of course, who was a powerboat racer, have any other members of the Stacey family ever had the urge to race?
Yeah, I think there was my uncle did some time trials, and my godfather as well. They played around, and I played around a little bit with minis and caterhams and go karts and powerboats and stuff. But Alan was the successful one. Dad was very successful in water, and then Alan was successful on the road. So I had all the motivation and everything, but I didn't really have the ability.
Yeah.
So. And also it's frighteningly expensive. So
Yes. Now, the one thing is, like I said at the start when we started chatting, his accident at Spa has remained relatively unexplained, hasn't it?
yes, I think that's partly because of Moss's accident during practice when the hub failed on his Lotus 18. The organisers decided to ban spectating from the fast back section of Spa. From then on, there weren't really many witnesses as to what could happen in any of the events.
Yeah.
Then, obviously, on top of that, no one ever analysed an accident. Nowadays, obviously, there'd be full analysis, but those days they swept everything up and got on to the next race.
Yeah. I mean, one strange explanation was, and it does happen, he was, his helmet or his head was struck by a bird.
It has happened. I mean, Jim Clark, famously French Grand Prix, had to sit out, I think, qualifying or something. But it does happen. I always, in my research, I always felt that the bird explanation was very convenient.
Yeah.
Given all the other things that were going on with Taylor's accident and Moss's accident and the fragility of the 18 anyway, I felt, and there's some other things that happened afterwards, I thought, that doesn't really smell right, but I don't have any evidence for that.
Yeah.
So Kevin was very, very carefully and wisely worded that section and did his own investigations and uncovered other examples of accidents and also other explanations for the accident, which was from contemporary reports. So even the reports on the day suspected or suggested that there may have been another cause.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about this book is, until I saw it, I wasn't altogether sure who Alan Stacey was. I knew he was a racing driver. I mean, he was killed in 1960, the year that I was born, so it's not a driver I remember. But has the book brought Alan Stacey back to not the much the forefront, but has it suddenly made people realise who Alan Stacey was?
I hope so. But we'll have to. I'm just fascinated with a lot of magazines and books that are about to publications that are about to publish their reviews.
Yeah.
So I'll be very interested to see as what they think. Obviously, I'm slightly biased, but I hope it's kept his memory alive, and I'll introduce his name to some other people that are much younger.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating story, and hopefully somehow translates into some positive messages for today.
Yeah.
Overcoming adversity and making the most of life and all that good stuff.
Besides, I conclude that there are still younger members of the Stacey family. Are they aware of who he was?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, definitely. My cousins, nieces and nephews. Yes, definitely. It has been passed down, but I think this book will be the jigsaw, the joining bit for the next generation. It was wonderful to see so many of the generation below me, my stepchildren and nieces and nephews, and everyone attending the book launch at Race Retro.
Yeah.
So hopefully they've got a book that will then, maybe pass it on for another generation.
Yeah.
If we're lucky. So yeah, wonderful. Really, really happy. It's definitely something the whole family knew about, even cousins in Australia, etc. And full support. David Stacey, my cousin, has been great in giving us access to his father's photo albums and other material and trophies and goggles and stuff like that. So it has been a team effort, but once again pulled all together by BHP.
And you were saying about Colin Chapman's son. Has it enhanced your relationship or rekindled your relationship with Lotus as such?
We've been super lucky to know Clive for a long time, been a great supporter of Classic Team Lotus, and Clive's been very kind in other areas. And so we did have a relationship with Clive, and do meet him, obviously at race events and things like that. I think that he's afterwards suggested it's filled in a gap in his knowledge because obviously it's before his time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it's maybe rekindled. It's a bit too much, but it's certainly kept our contacts within the greater Lotus community, Classic Team Lotus, Historic Lotus Register, etc. Have been very supportive of this project, and some people within it have been fantastic. Malcolm Ricketts, who restored Alan's Lotus 11, was a great supporter of this book and really wanted Alan's story to be told.
Yeah.
In fact, he pushed me along a bit.
And besides the Lotus of Alan's that you own, do any of his other cars still exist?
Some do, yeah. It's definitely the 16. We obviously raced. He didn't own the cars; he was racing for the team. But definitely the 16. We're in contact with the new owner for that one. He's just contacted us last month, and that's great to hear. The 11, one JVX, we know who owns that now. It's moved on, and some of the other vehicles. I think the 15 was for sale through one of the high-end car dealers last month. So it's a wonderful legacy. The 18, that's a difficult one because that was obviously destroyed in the fire, in the accident. So probably, just being diplomatic, I'm going to probably swerve that one. But wonderful seeing his name. I can open Motorsport and find his name still there as a reference driver when someone's trying to sell a car. So that's quite a nice little thing.
I mean, have you ever thought of trying to get the cars that still exist all together to go on display or to show somewhere?
We did. We have got a JVX and one of the 11s and the 6 together at different times. We've got the very first 18 that raced. He raced the prototype at Brands in Boxing Day. We know where that lives, and that's just been through Classic Team Lotus for a restoration. Maybe we did think about getting 2 or 3 for the stand at Race Retro, but the stand costs were so high that would. Maybe one day. Maybe now the book's done. Maybe we'll get some more. Probably, maybe one day.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice for it to say got them for the go on display, maybe with the British Racing Drivers Club down at Silverstone, or to have them on display together at Goodwood, and maybe for them to actually go out on the circuit and just do some demonstration laps.
There is that. Yes, Goodwood's a busy place, but that would be absolutely wonderful because certainly 3 or 4 of the cars have been raced there or displayed there. And that would be a real treat. Maybe that's Mark. You're sowing another seed here. Maybe that's the next project.
I was going to say, what comes next in the Alan Stacey saga, for want of a better word?
Wow, I think that the most exciting thing now is for the whole family to watch the reviews come in.
Yeah,
and we've got a few more interviews to do, and just probably see how that goes. We have got a couple of ideas that we're bouncing around with BHP, which I think we chatted about Race Retro. So just maybe watch this space. Let's see how the reviews go first.
Yeah.
If they're positive, maybe we'll do something down the audio route.
I mean, just out of interest, what's the family's reaction been to the book?
Oh, absolutely delighted. Yeah, really, really great messages from family and friends, and especially the direct siblings. Yeah, really, really excited. And distributing books to their siblings, etc. No, I've had some wonderful. That's probably the excuse me, get a bit tongue-tied here, but probably the most rewarding thing is seeing the siblings.
Yeah.
The response from them. Yeah. So I think that's been the highlight so far.
And I mean, ultimately, what's your father's reaction been? Because I mean, out of everybody, he was the closest.
He was, yes. You've seen from the book, they shared a broom together at the farmhouse, and obviously they were, as Dad's obviously said, he was a hero to Dad, but the slightly older brother.
Yeah.
He's absolutely delighted. Really, Gerald Prim and Mum, Dad, they can't say thank you often enough. So that's and to Kevin as well and the BHP team. So they really brought him alive, and it's a record, isn't it? It's something that will outlive the siblings and possibly us.
I mean, it's got to be one of those things, really, hasn't it? I mean, the Stacey, it's brought the name back to the fore. Ultimately, though you never knew him, has your father passed a comment on what Alan himself would have thought about all this?
I think he said he wouldn't have necessarily, well, maybe in Dad, I can't remember, he said he'd be not sure why he wouldn't have quite understood what all the fuss was about. Just kind of got on with it. But, I think as you get older, you get into more a retrospective or perspective mode, don't you? So maybe if he'd lived to, what would he be, 92 now? I think he'd be pretty chuffed, actually.
I mean, the one thing is, and I'll be quite honest, I am desperately trying to find it, but at his funeral, I quoted this to somebody the other day and they thought it was a strange thing to say. But Alan Stacey, the racing driver, his life might have been reasonably brief in the great scheme of things. But he lived a far more entertaining and packed far more into a life than most people do who reach old age.
Yeah, he put a lot into 26 years, especially when you look back through the photo albums. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe that was a cruel thing to say. I don't know, but I think for me or for the Stacey family, that's hit the right note.
Yeah. So, Alan Stacey, or Alan McGregor Stacey, it's been a pleasure chatting. I mean, I'm delighted by the book. It's a fantastic book. I did one of my online reviews of it a few weeks ago. It typifies the fact that drivers like this, who until this book have more or less been forgotten apart from by the family, but these guys need to be remembered, don't they? And their life stories need to be told.
Yeah, before it's too late. I was lucky enough to interview people who were still alive, and that goes into the book. And obviously, same with Kevin. So you're absolutely right. And good luck to BHP doing even more of these. And thanks, Mark, for all your promotion and your support. You've been an absolute star from the first moment we met. And thanks for promoting it.
Well, I know you're a little bit sceptical when we met at Race Retro. You seen after our introduction by John Saltonstall. But I mean, I hope you've enjoyed this. As I said, I thoroughly enjoyed them. I get a lot of books given me for review. Some are good, some are bad, some are bloody awful. But this one, you sit down and you start reading and you think, now, how's this one going to run? And it just is a fascinating book. I mean, it is worth buying purely, as I said, purely for the photographs. And at £35, it's very reasonably priced, given the price of some books these days, £35. I'm flicking through it again here in front of me. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of Alan stood with Colin Chapman, Costin, Alan, Innes Island, Graham Hill, John Ross. I mean, he was stood with the legends, and this book has ensured that, in my opinion, Alan Stacey, he might not have been at the time, but Alan Stacey has now taken his position along with the legends.
Oh, you're a star. That's very kind words. And I have to say, your comment of £35, my dad's made that comment quite a few times. It's ridiculously cheap for what you put. No, there's a tribute to BHP. They've done a grand job of doing a very high quality hardback book for what we think is a very reasonable price. But that's what they want. They want it to be accessible.
Yeah. So the book, once again, is Alan Stacey, His Life and Lotus Career, and it is truly fascinating. It's a shame when any racing driver is killed, but it makes you wonder what he would have gone on to achieve. He would have probably achieved greater things. And genuinely, well, he did do when he was racing. He gave the big names a hard time for the simple reason, I don't think he realised at the time, but he was a big name.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a fascinating story. Then it's interesting reading the story as other careers developed, like Clark and Innes Island, etc. At the same sort of 30s at the same time. But I should, on a slight aside, we did have a discussion about you just mentioned the title. We did have a discussion. We put it up for vote. And Life on a Limb was the title that was suggested. By a slim majority, Alan Stacey's Life and Lotus Career won over.
I must say I like the idea of that, Life on a Limb, or Life on One Limb. But
Yes, we play around with that, but we felt that for publishing reasons, Lotus and things like that need to be in the title.
yeah. But once again, Alan McGregor Stacey, thanks very much for joining me on the Backseat Driver, chatting about your uncle and chatting about this fantastic new book.
Thank you, Mark, once again.